What is up? Fixler here for Thomann synthesizers, and recently I've been playing a lot with various chorus and stereo enhancer plugins, everything that you need for placing a mono signal in a stereo mix in interesting ways. So I thought I'd share some of my findings and show you some of the tools that I regularly use and what are the various benefits and drawbacks. Alright, here we are in my Ableton, and before I show you how I like to use chorus effects, let's first have a little look at how to actually build your very own chorus inside Ableton, because I think this is the best way to explain how this effect actually works in detail. What I have here is a mono signal. I recorded it from Arturia's DX7 plugin, and it sounds like this in its dry state. And by the way, on this stereo tool here you can monitor the stereo width of the signal. This is what a mono signal looks like. And this is what a stereo signal looks like. Yeah, anyways, so how do we build our own chorus effect? What a chorus does is it takes a dry signal and then it duplicates it and applies a modulation to the duplicated version. So now I have an additional track, I have the exact same signal, and what a chorus is going to do effectively is it's going to take the signal and move it like this, relative to the dry signal, by applying a modulation to a delay. So what I have here already is a delay, just Ableton's internal delay, and what we are going to do is we're going to modulate the delay time here. And as you can hear, because this delay is in repitch mode, it's not only going to change the timing, but it's actually also going to change the pitch, sort of like on a tape delay. And this is also very important for this effect to work. But in order to achieve it in a more controlled and rhythmical manner, we are going to use this LFO, map it to the delay time, and now we can choose either a sine wave or a triangle wave. In this case I have a sine wave here, and this is what it sounds like. As you can see, it's now moving on its own. And if we now play it back with a dry signal, we're already going to hear some chorus-like characteristics. But of course it's still mono, so what I'm going to do is, either you could just take one of them to the right, one of them to the left, and it would sound like this. Which is already a beautiful stereo signal actually. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take even a third track, and I'm going to leave the dry signal in the middle, put one of the copies almost all the way to the left, one almost all the way to the right. And here I already prepared the same thing, a delay with an LFO, but this one has slightly different settings, so now I can control them individually, give them a distinct LFO rate and modulation depth. So now let's have a look at the dry signal again and listen. This is what it sounds before. And now with the two additional tracks engaged, this is what it sounds and looks like. And yeah, this is now a proper chorus effect. And yeah, that's actually the essence of what a chorus does. Anyways, let's now move on to some more practical versions of this effect. Here again is our mono signal. And as you can see, I have various chorus effects lined up here. First of which is the Ableton internal chorus, called chorus ensemble. Which also goes into more extreme settings if you like. If you want to introduce another voice, you can use the ensemble setting. also has this warmth knob here, which introduces some distortion. Which you can hear in the louder moments. And lastly, it also allows you to just affect just the dry signal without any duplications. So then effectively it works like a vibrato effect. So yeah, that's a very basic version of this. Another alternative is the Tricera chorus by Eventide, which I always like a lot. Here I just usually skip through presets until I'm almost happy, and then I have to tweak it a bit. Yeah, and then this one is also really great. Choral by Native Instruments. Here you have an amount and rate for the modulation. Width to control the amount of the stereo signal compared to the mono signal. Delay time, and here the amount of voices. And the feedback. Yeah. So I would say these three chorus effects are more classical chorus effects that also change the characteristic of the sound and introduce, aesthetically, introduce new information and an additional vibe. These next three that I'm going to show you are really much more neutral because they are more specialized on just taking a mono signal, making it stereo, creating new stereo information. And they also, I think, all take into account what happens to your mono signal. Because let me demonstrate what can happen with chorus effects. If I take this utility, put it into mono mode, and now listen what happens to our mono signal once I start to engage a chorus. Depending on a setting, just like here, you can also see it below here with the waveform. The sound becomes much more inconsistent. Why? Because you have various versions of the same signal running in and out of phase with each other. So, of course, sometimes they're going to cancel each other out, affecting the overall amplitude of the signal, affecting the overall physical impact of the sound. So if you listen, for example, on a Bluetooth speaker, which is mono, or if you're in a nightclub standing in front of one speaker very close to it, you effectively receive a mono signal. So for many listening scenarios like this, it's important to, in a mixdown phase, preserve the impact of the mono signal. So that's where these next three effects come in handy. Starting out here with the chorus Dimension D, which is a plug-in emulation of the legendary Roland Dimension D, which was meant as a classic chorus unit, but it was so subtle in its effect that people usually used it just as a spatial processor. And the great thing about it is that it almost doesn't affect the mono signal. So let's listen to it first in mono mode and see what it does to the signal. I think it still has a tiny effect on the mono signal, but it's negligible for the concerns that I mentioned. So now let's listen in stereo mode. Yeah, really beautiful, and as you notice, it's super neutral. So it introduces a lot of new stereo information, but it really doesn't change the characteristic that much. And sometimes that's exactly what you want. By the way, there's also a hardware version of this, like a clone, by Clark Technic called the Third Dimension. So if you're into hardware effects and rack units, then maybe this is the solution for you. I played around with both of them for a while and compared them, and I couldn't really tell that much of a difference. So I'm personally going to stay with the plugin version just because it's more practical and easier to use for me, and also it has these additional advanced features here which were not featured on the original, where you, for example, can control dry wet width and the waveform of the modulation. Anyways, up next, very similar to the Dimension D, is this effect by Sound Toys, which is widely used, the Microshift, and I think it has more of a negative effect on the mono version, as you can hear now. But it's not as bad, and because you can focus the effect on a specific place in the frequency spectrum, you can make sure to preserve the fundamental frequencies of the incoming signal. And now in stereo mode it sounds like this. Yeah, also very subtle in terms of characteristics, but introduces a lot of stereo information. And then lastly, and this might be my favorite because it's really fascinating, Side Widener is the name of this plugin, and what it does is that it completely 100% perfectly preserves the mono signal. So if I turn the utility to mono and A/B it, absolutely nothing happens, because the mono signal is not affected at all. But listen to the huge effect it has in stereo mode. Yeah, here you can control the amount of the added stereo signal. You have 3 slightly different versions of the effect, and a tone control which effectively equalizes the wet signal. And I think this must be my favorite solution. I use it on at least 5 or 6 different tracks in each mix down that I do of my music, because it just, yeah, it perfectly preserves the mono compatibility and it doesn't affect the aesthetic at all. It just creates stereo information from a mono signal. So that's a win in my books. Alright, I guess that's it from my side for today. In case you have any questions, as usual, let me know in the comments and I'm trying to get back to you ASAP. Apart from that, thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Peace out.